Yeah, I'm kind of nervous. It looks intense from what my grandpa told me.
I'm so sad. So you can't watch with your grandpa because you.
No.
Oh, a sad day. Bad timing.
Bad timing.
Yep. It's a doozy.
Crazy. This cast this year was crazy.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I appreciate everyone being here and tuning in. My name's Adam Gordon, and I'm the co-founder of Rising Coaches. And super excited about today's show. As always, Ashton and Aaron have done a great job of bringing in some great guests and talking about some poignant topics, which today's conversation is super important. But before I hand it over to them, we just always like to talk about, you know, why we started Rising Coaches and what we're about. And we talk about three things: we're community, relationships, and development. And so we try to, you know, we started this thing just as a way to build a community so that coaches could get together and have like real conversations about, you know, the profession and the sport that we love and coaching, without having to worry about like the politics and all the, you know, BS that goes into the coaching profession. Just where we could connect and just like actually talk and meet people and form genuine relationships. And because, you know, I coached on the men's side, it took off, you know, and grew pretty rapidly there. And when I got out of coaching last year and went full time, like the big priority for me was to make sure that we built a similar community built on, you know, genuine, real relationships on the women's side. And so, you know, I'm super excited to have Ashton and Aaron, you know, putting the show together on a weekly basis and putting in so much hard work on it. And also behind the scenes, Shannon Mathis, who I don't even know if Shannon's on here yet, but Shannon put together our new intro, which is awesome. So anyways, big shout out to those three for all the hard work they do, and appreciate you guys being on. Appreciate our guests being here. And I'm going to mute my mic and shut up and let Ashton roll our new big time intro.
All right. Yeah, this is going to get us pumped up for today's special conversation. Here we go.
Eyes wide open, darkness closing. Just stay focused, I'm not folding. I'll upset you, cause I'm just too dangerous. I'm dangerous. Let's be honest, say no contest. Take those comments for my concept. From the get-go, I just get so dangerous, so dangerous. Yeah, two equal sides, no equal ties. Yo,
All right. I think that was awesome. What do you think, Aaron?
Yes. Yeah, that is so cool. It makes me want to like play. I can't play anymore, but
I'm ready to go run into
I know I have a basketball under my desk, so I was like, whoa, I should probably like grab it. But yeah, definitely. Also, fun fact, Ashton and I met today for the first time in person, which is super
awesome,
exciting news. I picked her up from the airport in Denver, so we wanted to let our viewers know that we have officially met each other.
We have grown into this beautiful partnership of women in sports. I think it's really awesome that me and Aaron got to spend about an hour together and just kind of talk about the future of women in sport. We're both really energetic and passionate people, and I just think it's a great partnership, and I'm glad that we got to meet today.
Definitely excited to talk about our topics for tonight. Do you want me to go ahead and introduce Patty? Awesome. All right. Patty's really cool, you guys. So Coach Patty Medina founded Hooper Mentality after witnessing firsthand the needs of youth from basketball programs in the inner city areas of San Diego and Orange County. She has been coaching at many different levels for 16 years. And throughout those years, she has seen what depression, anxiety, and mental health issues can do to athletes and coaches. She personally suffered from depression and has had to attend the funerals of former student athletes that have fallen to depression, drug addiction, or suicide. She also watched the athletes finish their basketball careers and fall into depression because they were not adequately prepared for this workforce. So basically, Hooper Mentality provides athletes from elementary school to college to properly resource them to deal with mental health issues and to help diminish the stigma surrounding mental health issues in the minority community. Along with the mental health related assistance, Hooper Mentality will provide resources for athletes in areas of life skills and business skills. They discuss topics such as money management, business startup, resume building, interview skills, and many more necessary areas of expertise that the educational system fails to emphasize. Coach Medina aims to make Hooper Mentality a safe haven for all athletes and to share their testimonies and find the necessary resources for whatever circumstances they're facing. We're extremely honored to have Patty Medina on our show tonight, as well as thankful for her work and her work that she does with athletes and mental health.
Yeah,
Thank you for the intro.
Of course, of course.
super excited. And our other guest is Julie Fournier, who is the current CEO and founder of Basketball is Psychology. Not only is Julie the founder and CEO of Ball is Psych, she's also a current student athlete at Colorado Christian. She not only has an elite mindset on the court, but she has developed an extremely sound mindset off the court. She's using her platform to change the narrative of the mental aspects of the game. Julie saw a need for this in the basketball community and decided to use her resources to create an empowering brand that has helped many people since she first started. Julie teaches us that her mind and our mind must be the greatest strength to reach your full potential. Basketball is Psychology has grown to have over 28,000 subscribers all over the world in all different countries. Every Monday, regardless of her duties as a student athlete, Julie sends out an incredible blog with details on how to strengthen your mind. Julie is a true example of a servant leader and is using her game of basketball for all around her. She's a good friend, so I'm really excited to have you on.
Having me.
Yes.
Awesome. And then also, Ashton, I forgot to introduce myself, but my name's Erin Sinnott. I Chicago, played basketball at the University of Evansville for 2 years, transferred to a Division II school in Buffalo, New York, graduated a year ago, I think today, then worked for a ministry over this. After that ended my undergraduate assistantship at Southern Illinois Rising Coaches and finishing my master's degree, moved to Denver, Colorado. So
Yeah, no, really aligns with my passion. I couldn't think of I'm Ashton Pill. Just quick run through my journey. College athlete at the NAIA level, was working the camp circuit and got an opportunity to continue to pursue my dream of being a student athlete. So I'm really fortunate. My sophomore year up and I have 2 more years left. So I'm really excited during different Zoom sessions like this one, because I think we can learn a lot from this experience. So I'm really excited. My time, we're really just trying to give a story and kind of give us tools that we can use. Question is for both of you, and how do you start your day? What are some, before you get out of bed, like what are you to do to really create that elite?
I guess I can go first. Struggled with quarantine is first few weeks of quarantine, I was very waking up early and doing my prayer. And then once we got into quarantine, there's days where 2 p.m. or I'll wake up or whatnot. And so I think I've learned to just be more forgiving with myself. You know, there's that. And so I've learned where I'm not productive, and there's days when I just want to scroll through Instagram, and there's days where I do wake up early, and that's one of the become a little difficult as far as like to really learn how to become your own outside of work. And so it's just a day by day thing. One thing that I do keep and I try to sustain is my prayer life, and listening to gospel and making sure that the things in mind are empowering.
Thing I do when I wake up, I don't. And I had a mentor tell me, talk to on your phone, they deserve the best you. So instead of waking up and talking to people, take that time. Is I get my coffee. I'm not going to be, and I read my devotion, Walk in Love, every day by Great Devotional. So that's how I.
Really good.
And then just kind of to out your amazing cause that is founding, it really made you realize mental health and the impact. I know something that really resonated with me, not having like the blanket statements of like people with mental health issues, but everyone has mental health.
Right.
And so how do you use like that and like the impact that you've had to help create something.
Well, there were two things that went. One was I've had, in the 16 years that I've coached, I've had I've attended, I was a 9 coach when I had a middle school player. And so I was 19 and I had a player that was 12, and so at the time being 19, like I didn't feel they're all dealing with it, like I never had sat down with how are you dealing with this? How are you coping? We didn't discuss coping skills. And so after the last former player committed suicide, I had a conversation with her mom, and the only thing I found myself doing was apologizing. Like I kept apologizing. I said, I'm sorry. Like I should have been more help. I should have been someone she could have reached out to. And so I kept apologizing for all the could have, should have, would haves. And one thing she told me, and it literally like just flipped my switch, was like, you can't bring her back. No matter how many times you apologize, you can't bring her back. She's like, the only thing we can do is help prevent from this happening again. And so that's when, for me, it was like, okay, I want to do something about this. Like, what can we do? What can we do? And it wouldn't come to me. And so I got this notification that Nike was going to hold this conference called Women in the Game. And it was their first year having it. Then they had it in Washington, D.C. area, but it's called Women in the Game. And all it is women empowerment. And so we went to this conference, and I had a former player. I have a former player, JP, who played for me at the junior college level, then played D1 basketball, went to Western Illinois, played at D1 basketball, graduated, and she calls me and she's like, I graduated 2 months ago. I'm unemployed. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going into depression. Like, I need help. And so again, as coaches, and as parents, we tend to take on our athletes' struggles very heavily. And so I felt like I did her a disservice, because if you're not prepared when you graduate from college, then I didn't do my job as a coach. And so I said, you know what, JP, come with me to this conference. I'll pay it, let's go. And so we drive up to LA, we go to this conference, and it was probably the best conference I've been to. It was like $40. It was a whole day thing. And it was all women. And so what it was they had different women from different areas of sports. And so when you think a career in sports, you think a career as a coach or an athletic trainer. But at this conference, they had the lady that worked ticket sales for the Clippers. Then they had the president, who was the president then of the LA Sparks. They had her. Then Coach Corey Close was there. Then you had other people that were there. And it was just one of those things where, for me, I'm like, this is amazing. This is a great resource. This is something that, I've wanted to do, and something that I'm not familiar with. And so JP sitting in the conference with me, and she was like, this is great information, coach. Like, sorry, my thing switched. And so she was like, I didn't know there were this many careers for sports. And so one of the ones that stood out to me was, there was this lady, actually not lady, but Coach Corey Close, who's a friend of mine, coach at UCLA. She was one of the speakers. And so, I asked her, one of my questions that I posed was, how do you prepare your athletes, for after college? Because here I am with one of my former players, and I felt like I didn't do her enough justice. And she said, you know what, we have resources on campus. We have a mental skills coach. We have this. And so she started listing all the resources that a D1 has. And I just thought, wow, that's amazing. Like, mind you, I come from NAIA. I coached at the NAIA level. I didn't have athletic trainer. I hardly had a gym half the time I was a coach. And so for me, like, hearing that some athletic programs, each sport at UCLA, each sport has their own mental skills coach. So you have a mental skills coach that goes and sits with your team, and solely your team, and talks about a lot of these issues. And so I was like, JP, let's go get some food after this and let's talk. So we sat down and we talked, and I said, what if we do something like that, but we extend it and bring it at the age group that needs it the most, which is the 12 and 13-year-olds, the kids that are going from elementary school to middle school that need these resources the most. And so that same day, this was April of not last year, but the year before, that same day, I bought the domain name. I literally got the website going, like all these things. And I was like, this is what I want to do. But at the time, I still wanted to coach. Like, I still wanted to be a head coach. I was still pursuing my title as a head coach. And so I ended up getting a job as a head coach at a program that I started from scratch. And it just took everything out of me. And so I didn't invest any time into the nonprofit. And then, fast forward, I'll talk about that on a later question, but that's literally how it started. Like, I went and I was able to listen. Like, I mean, these conversations could trigger something in anyone's mind and be like, oh, wow, I can do that too. Or, you know what? Oh, how about I do this program? And so going to that conference, Women in the Game, and I know they were supposed to do it this year in Philadelphia and in LA, but obviously it got postponed. But it was one of the best conferences that I've been to. And they literally did not go over any plays. They didn't go over any coaching philosophies. It was literally like how to be a woman in leadership positions and how to be a woman in the sports industry. And so for me, that's something that, I wanted to make sure that I provided for my athletes.
Yeah. No, that's literally incredible. I think it's something just from like my experience as well, that being in the real world for a year, it's extremely important. And if you don't have that guidance and that help, it can be pretty lonely, like what you said. So that's amazing.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and it's one of those things where it's like, you want, as coaches, we want to be able to be that person that these players reach out to even after they're done playing for us. JP reached out to me and she hadn't played for me for probably 4 years, and so I just thought, well, what if I hadn't been an option for her to reach out to, So we have to be more adamant about keeping those relationships and just tapping in with our players like that have played for us years ago. Like, hey, just checking in, you crossed my mind. I'm a big believer that no one is really implanted in your mind out the blue. Like, if you wake up one morning and you wake up with somebody in your heart, like for me, that's like, okay, I got to text this person. Just recently there was a girl on Twitter of a coach who I saw all the postings of, like, the interim coaches were relieved of their services and this and that. And like, I read her tweets. And then the next day I woke up and I had her on my mind and I was like, you know what, I'm going to reach out. I don't even know this coach, but I'm going to reach out and I'm going to tell her, like, hey, I've been in your position and you have to trust God and you have to trust that there's a plan. And she said, you know what? She was like, no one has reached out to, like, actually tell me that has been in that position. And so for me, I think everything we go through at some point is because we want to be able to help someone else that's going through it,
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's just a barrier in itself to have your student athletes feel comfortable enough to go to your coaches and, have that conversation. But once you do, it's like that connection is forever. So I agree with that. Julie, just kind of flipping it over to you. How, as a student athlete, did you come to realize the importance of mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. So several teammates just transfer and just like go home out of the blue, and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, I'm just depressed and I'm completely miserable. And I've had the chance to play at the Division 1 level, JUCO, and that was everywhere. So I was like so caught off guard by this, because I'm like, well, we're playing Division 1 basketball, like, why are you depressed? And it's like everyone's going through something. And just because you're an athlete, just because you're a successful athlete, doesn't mean you're immune to it. I mean, I had a teammate whose fiance got cancer and passed away. And I remember going into my coach's office and I was like, what do I say? And she was my roommate at the time. So I'm like, I don't know what to say to this girl. And now here at CCU, I had a professor say, people need your presence more than they need your profundity. So while I was getting caught up in, oh, what advice do I give them? What do I say? What they really need is someone to be there for them, just a shoulder to cry on. So like I was all getting caught up in what advice did I give them, but I've realized, what people need when they're going through that, and what I've seen in my teammates is they just need someone there for them. They just need someone who will listen with big ears and all the time in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Just kind of adding on to that, how do you strive to continue those conversations about mental health? You know, you've worked on that the past few years with different teammates. You know, how are you continuously, like, every day trying to break those barriers? Because it's a tough subject to talk about.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in the sports world, people see tears as weakness and not showing emotions as strength. And so athletes have been told from day one, suck it up, toughen up. And that might work during a game, but it's dangerous to carry that message off the court because then we never learn how to hold the weight of our emotions. So we're telling athletes it's not okay to not be okay, when really what they need to hear is it is okay to not be okay, because if anything, the sports world is so pressurized that athletes are much more prone to those mental illnesses. And so I think we just need to talk about it more, because the more we talk about it, the more we talk about getting counseling and seeing a sports psychologist, we take away power from the stigma. I like to think of it as like, if I sprain my ankle, I there's no shame in me telling my coach, "Hey coach, I sprained an ankle." And they're like, "Oh, go see the trainer, go see the doctor." But if I'm having a hard time with depression and anxiety, it's like, ooh, like there's so much shame that I don't even feel comfortable going to my coach about it. So I think if we can, as coaches, create that space to say, "Hey, your number one priority is your mental health. So if that's something you're struggling with, it's okay to not be okay." So I think just not shying away from having those conversations will be a great way to break those barriers.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think just having a conversation in itself is something that's going to go a long, long way, like you said. What would you say, just at the different schools that you've been at, have been some resources that have really helped people around you that maybe need that extra step in, looking for help in that mental health, awareness?
Hmm. Yeah, most schools have free counselors on campus, and I'd say if you're a coach and you're unsure, like go ask someone in the psych department, and that's been really beneficial for me. Being a student of psychology, like I know where the counseling place is if I have someone who like is curious about it. So I'd say just getting familiar with those resources and making sure your players know that those are available and it is more than okay to go see a counselor.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree.
Yeah, definitely. I think even to a lot of the vibe with like going to see somebody or talking to somebody is like, oh, I'll like find time for it. I'll do it next week, or like, oh, I'm too busy this week. I think the biggest thing that someone did for me, like as like coaching, was like sit me down and made me really talk about my feelings and how I felt. And I don't like, I think if that wouldn't have happened, I'd probably be, it would have done my like future a disservice, because I definitely would have kept pushing it off. And then now I'm not an athlete anymore and I have all of this time to think and really like sit in that. And it definitely, I'm definitely thankful for that. So I think it's huge to use those resources and services. But this is just kind of a question for both of you. But what has kind of been your approach towards mental health, since it is something that people do shy away from and it isn't always out in the open, but is kind of now more than anything. But yeah, just kind of your approach towards that.
It's fun, just to kind of piggyback on what you had said earlier, Erin, as far as like, mental health. We, and it's no offense to anything that was already said, but I think one of the main things that we have to do, especially those of us in the profession and that are trying to help destigmatize mental health, is like not address it as an illness. Because again, and we talked about this earlier, we had the conversation about it's not an illness. It's not something that you can, you can get like a virus. It's not something that you can, that you can take medicine for and you avoid it. Like granted, you can take antidepressants, you can take, but at the end of the day, like these are things that have to be addressed. And so one of the main things for me, and it's funny because like, we have hoodies for my nonprofit, which is something that I never in my mind thought, hey, I want a nonprofit and we want to give out hoodies or we want to sell hoodies. But what I started to realize is that once I got one, and then people were like, oh, I actually made shirts in my sister's garage. We made shirts and I was wearing them out and about, and people were like, hey, like, I like your shirt. And they're like, what is it? And I'm like, and so we start talking about mental health. And so, then I have this great group chat of coaching friends, and I was just like, hey, I think I'm going to release hoodies. And they're like, oh, we're going to buy one, and so literally like all the coaches in our group chat bought one. And it's, for me, what I've learned is that you have to be able to provide the platform for that dialogue, and so the way we started our nonprofit is like we started a YouTube channel. So we started as a YouTube channel, and I had former players share their testimonies. So I had one that went to a school, and as a freshman was sexually assaulted at a frat party, left, and she went to the school, right? We thought, oh, wow, she's going to this school and it's a great school. It's a great D1 and she's going to go. And then all of a sudden she just came back. And like, there was no like say as to why she came back. She was just like, oh, we figured like, oh, she just got homesick, And so I reached out to her, and mind you, this was our freshman year of college. I'm old. So I graduated 2003. She went to this university. Obviously, we can't state the name of the university where she was sexually assaulted, but she went to his university, came back, went to JUCO. And I remember like having conversations with her, like, oh, what happened? Oh, I got homesick. So then when I started the nonprofit, I hit her up and I was like, hey, Marla, like, I'm going to start this nonprofit. Like, what do you think? And she's like, I would love to be your first guest on your YouTube. And so I'm thinking like, I've known Marla for 20 years, I've known her since I was 12 years old. Like, what could she possibly share that, like she's dealing with? And so I was like, okay, go ahead. Like, just send me the video. She sends me the video. I'm crying. And again, I'm calling her and I'm like, I'm sorry that you couldn't feel like you could tell me this. So she shares this video and she talks about how she was sexually assaulted at a frat party and how, she didn't tell anybody like her. So I was like, okay, are you ready to post this video? And she was like, let me call my mom, my dad, and my brother and tell them about it before they find out via YouTube. So I'm just like, yo, you've been sitting on this for the last 20 years. And she's like, yeah, just no one's ever really like said, hey, what is something that you're carrying? Like, what is a weight that you're carrying? And so she shared that YouTube video and, we were crying. I had other former players that reached out and they said they had been molested by their parents, by their dad, by their uncle. And so literally like the first 4 days of launching the nonprofit, and it was just a YouTube channel, I'm crying because I'm just like, like Julie said, like, what do you say? Like, what do you say to them? Like, hey, I'm sorry that your dad was an asshole and was touching you a certain way. It's like, what do you say? And so for me, it's like, okay, we need to provide a platform for people to share their testimonies. And, you have Players Tribune, but I mean, who's on Players Tribune? NBA players, famous people are sharing their testimonies. It's like, what about us regular folk that want to share their story? And so we started posting different things. And like I said, the hoodie, it was more so a means to get the conversation going. And so, and I literally was just telling one of my best friends today, I'm like, Nini, I don't want to become a retailer. We're not a retailer. Like, we're not, because I have people calling like, hey, are you going to do like short sleeve? Are you doing long sleeve? I'm like, no, that's, like, I love that you guys love the product, but at the same time, it's like, okay, we want to maintain the focus that we want to provide a way to create this dialogue. And so now we have people that are like posting. I mean, I have some of my great coaching friends in this chat, like they've bought hoodies and they've shared their testimony. They'll post a picture of the hoodie, of them wearing a hoodie with the caption, and in the caption, they share their story. Like, what other way would they have been able to share that? Like, hey, just a random post, like, hey, I think today I'm going to post about my ACL tear and how I dealt with it. It's like, no, like but it's something that needs to be said because there's other people that are dealing with it. And so, Brie Martinez, she's in here and she is like one of my models for my nonprofit. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, hey, Bree, you have a story to tell, you know, and it's like, how can we get that story across? You know what? Like these hoodies, like she posts a picture of herself in the hoodie and the caption is her testimony. Then she's got other players saying like, hey, I went through that, or hey, I just tore my ACL. How did you deal with that? How did you bounce back? You know, and so it creates that dialogue, you know, it creates that dialogue, and it's something that we don't have enough of, you know. And no offense to professionals and school campuses, you know, psychologists and all that, but sometimes the athletes don't want to go and sit in someone's professional office and be told that, hey, go get antidepressants or go and, you know, do these little worksheets and then you feel a lot better. It's like, no, I really just want to sit here and talk to someone that I see every day and that would know what I'm going through. And so I worked under a head coach recently that would get mad because the players would come into my office and like one of the players was telling me that her dad's boyfriend was in jail and that mom was like going into depression because the boyfriend was in jail. And so the head coach comes in and she's like, this is not a conversation that needs to be had in our office, you know? And I'm like, okay, well, this is supposed to be a safe haven. This is supposed to be, you know, an open door policy for coaches and their athletes. What is the problem? You know? And she was like, no, there's psychologists on campus that she can go talk to. You know, and so, and mind you, the player is sitting there listening to this. So she in turn made herself someone even more unapproachable because you are now not being sympathetic to what they're going through, you know? And so I literally told the player like, hey, I'll meet you outside. Let's go out and we'll talk outside. You know, we'll talk outside, because all she really wanted was to get it off her chest right before practice so that she can be productive during practice. And so those are things that we as coaches need to like really check in with our players. Like, hey, how are you today? I'm good. Oh, you just good? Like, just good? You know, what's going on? Like, you know, and so granted, it takes a lot of time. You have to get to know your players. You have to invest in your players. And a lot of coaches see it as time consuming, you know, but some of the best coaches are the ones that build their relationships with the players on and off the court. And so I think that's something that for me, I'm excited to be a part of a way to create this dialogue with coaches. You know, I mean, even my coaching friends that are in here now, like they, you know, they got a hoodie and then their players are going to be like, hey coach, where'd you get your hoodie? Or I like your hoodie. And it's like, oh yeah, it's about mental health. And it's like, oh, well, I deal with depression too. And it's like, you're going to learn so many things about people just by pretty much like throwing that lob and saying like, okay, let's talk about it, you know, and a lot of people don't do that. Enough coaches don't do that because it's time consuming, because it's dramatic, you know, it's a lot of drama. You don't want to know about their personal lives and things like that. But again, those are things that are going to make them better athletes on the court if they're able to trust that, you know, they can come and talk to you. You're not going to turn them into a halfway house. You know, they're going to be like, okay, I can come and talk to my coach. And now I'm going to run through a wall for this coach that literally just sat there and listened, you know? So.
Yeah, definitely run through the wall. I've definitely had experiences where coaches were creating an environment that made me feel safe. And I was able to do things that I never thought I'd be on a very successful like D2 team that just made it to the tournament this past year, like things that I never thought, but because of the environment that we had that was so safe, and it was just something that made me as a player feel so comfortable. And I knew that those coaches like genuinely cared about me. And I really truly believe that it does make all the difference in the W's and the L's, which ultimately puts a lot of pressure on the coaches in general, which is a whole different topic. But
right,
yeah,
right.
even Julie, you too, like what kind of, how do you, like you said, like even with teammates, I feel like sometimes we just don't have like a relationship with somebody, even if it's kind of like an upperclassman and an underclassman. I know that those are lots of situations happen with that, but even how do you approach or like open that dialogue and not be something that's kind of vague, you know, just like, oh yeah, I'm here for you, but kind of how have you been able to bridge that gap with people?
That's a great question. I actually got to interview Vic Schaefer for one of my blogs, and I asked him how he kind of like creates those relationships with his players, because every time I see him, he's like hugging a player and he just seems so close. And he said every day, every player has to come by his office and sign his door. And he's like, it's just a way of us building those relationships and trying to be more approachable. And a lot of times those players stop by and they'll just have a conversation, and it turns into like, how are you doing today? Like, oh, what's wrong? Like, why? And it's not about name on the door. It's about how can I, as a leader, become more approachable? And you look at Pat Summit. She would not let her players call her Coach Summit. It was Pat. It was call me Pat. And she used to say, I felt like players would be more comfortable, coming to me and sharing their story, sharing those deep emotions like Patty was talking about, if they could call her by her first name. So I think a lot of it comes down to just trying to be as approachable as possible. I think the great leaders are approachable about anything. You can talk to them about, a great recipe for dinner, or you can talk to them about those heavy things like how you're doing mentally and emotionally. So it just comes down to trying to be very approachable.
Definitely being approachable, I think, is the biggest thing. And it's something that, like, as I feel like a big thing is like coaches recruit players. So I think it's always been a huge bummer when players get there and they feel like coaches are just not interested. And I think that's a big thing too, is just like for coaches to be transparent in recruiting and not just putting on this facade to get a player there, because they ultimately, like, parents are trusting coaches with their kids for the next 4 years, regardless if they're 18 years old or however old they are. So I definitely agree. I didn't know the Pat Summit thing. That's really, really, really cool.
Yeah, that's why I go by Coach Patty.
Yeah. Wait, that's so awesome. I did not know that.
I'm like, and Coach Bree too, who's also here. Like, we hate going by our last names. It's like Coach Patty or Coach Bree, and I've worked under some old heads that are like, oh, it has to be Coach Medina. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, I've been Coach Patty since I was 16, 17 years old coaching. And, I think it's one of those things like what's in the name, but really it makes you more personable, and like Juliana said, like, it makes you more approachable. It puts you at it's like when you coach youth, I don't know if you guys have heard, like, drop down to eye level with the kids, like take a knee and when you're coaching little kids, drop down to a knee, coach them at eye level, because it teaches them that, like, they're not the oppressed, like, and you're not the, super authority, because it builds that, like, instead of being like a relationship where, okay, I want to listen to everything that this coach is saying, it turns into this situation where it's like, oh wow, that's just the leader, and that's like, the Hitler of this camp. It's like, no, y'all can come and talk to me too, even though I'm running the camp. You guys can come and talk to me, and so, like, I'll take a knee and I'll talk to the little kids. I hug the hell out of kids. It's probably a good thing that we can't do any camps, because we'd be defying all kinds of COVID rules, because I'm like a hugger, physical touch. Learning the 5 love languages is another way that coaches can become better coaches, because not everyone deals with certain things the same way. Like, if you have my friend, her parents, her mom passed from COVID at like 6 a.m, and by 1 p.m. her dad passed, literally the same day, like 6 hours later. And it was one of those things where it's like, I've known her and I know that she's the type that she needs her space and she needs to, be left alone. And so I just sent her a text and I said, hey, I heard about what happened. Like, if I'm here, if you need anything. I didn't hear from her for like 2 days. But once I finally heard from her, she was like, thank you for giving me that space, because, people will start blowing up those phones and be like, hey, are you okay? Are you okay? And the last thing they want to do is talk. And so we just have to be able to provide that comfort,
Absolutely. Definitely agree with that.
Yeah, really good. Just adding on to this whole idea of like the player coach relationship, how do we as coaches help our student athletes understand like their value off the court? Like, they're more than just the stat sheet. Like, what are some things that you guys try to do?
I'm like, I can't hear her.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear all of you.
Did you not hear my question?
No, I did.
Okay.
I know for me, my identity was so wrapped up in the game. And I didn't really learn how to separate those until I got injured for a while. And it was like, okay, well, I can't play basketball. And in my mind, I was always Julie, the basketball player. So what now? And I wish I would have realized that before I got injured, because now that I'm playing and let's say I have a bad game, I don't go home and think, oh, I'm a bad basketball player. I'm like, it's just a bad game. And that has allowed me to enjoy the game so much more. So I think if coaches can, get to players and let them understand that, there's going to come a time, even if you play in the WNBA, that'll be another 20 years max. Like that still only takes you to 40 years old. Like after that, there's something else. So I think you have to, try to help them find their passion off the court, or whether that is coaching or sports psychology, just helping them, find out what their passion is and encouraging them to go after it and start developing their skill set in that area while they're still playing.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Coach Patty, what kind of is your take on something like that? Since you have kind of been in the coaching game and you have really had different, worn different hats, as Zoe, I think, said earlier. But yeah, how have you been able to take those kids that might not have had someone help them find their passion during their 4 years? And what have you really been able to see as being successful for getting players to figure out who they are outside of their sport?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that we do with our nonprofit is like resume building. So we help with resume building. I've had a few players like reach out to me and they're like, I've never had a job. I've never had a job and I'm about to graduate and all I've done the last 4 years is play basketball. And I get to be that person and be like, are you kidding me? You'd be one of the most, if someone were to not hire you, they'd be ridiculous to not hire you because you have all the qualities. Not because you have the experience or you don't have the, the employment experience, but you have all the qualities. When someone plays on a basketball team, they're a teammate. They have time management skills. They have leadership skills. They have, every attribute that an employer is looking for, they have it, and it's literally just learning how to put it on paper so that when they submit a resume, it's like, oh, wow, you've never worked. No, but I've been a coach and I've been a team captain and I've been, and so they're able to learn how to vouch for themselves. And so that's one of the things that we focus on is I'll get emails and say, hey, can you please edit my resume? And I'll edit resumes and, and I'm still learning too. Like I've asked Adam, like, hey, what do you think? And then it's like, my resume is 20 pages. Oh, maybe you should narrow it down, and it's like, we're all learning. And so it's like I read this quote the other day and it was like it was actually, I didn't read it. I was listening to Wisenard series, Kobe Bryant's Wisenard series. And one of the Wisenard proverbs was, the moment you think that someone is perfect is the moment you can no longer help them, or you no longer are a help to them, or something like, it was something to that extent. But it really resonated with me because it's like, okay, the moment that we think that our players are good, like, oh, they graduated, they're good to go. It's like, that's the moment we stop helping them. And so for me, I try to tap in with my players. Like, even I had a player just recently that bought a hoodie, they bought a hoodie and I hadn't talked to her for like 18 years, 18 years because she was a former teammate of mine and she bought a hoodie. And like, I literally reached out and I was like, hey, like, thanks for buying a hoodie. Like, how's life going? And it was just one of those things where it's like, we have to be able to make the time to, check in with our players and make sure that we know where they are mentally before they even step on the court. And so one of the resources is that the resume. And then another resource that we do is, we try to build networks. And so I have players that, same with all my coaching group chat that we have, it's like, hey, Christina, like I have somebody that wants to meet you because they're looking to be in this position, or they're trying to coach at the D1 level. I don't know. I don't have any experience, but what about you? And so I try to connect them. I think for me, a lot of times I've noticed that some coaches don't want to share their network. They don't want to be like, oh, hey, I know Coach Yo, like, let me plug you. Like, no, they don't, because they want to just keep that to themselves. And so for me, anybody that I know, I will be like, hey, you know, if you're looking to get hired at a pharmaceutical, like, let me find out which one of my friends are coaches, you know, and my friends laugh because they're like, you know, everybody. It's like, I know everybody because I've reached out to literally every single industry that I've been able to find for my players. And so in turn, it kind of helps. And like, I'll tell my players all the time, like, don't make me look bad, because if I send one player and they do a great job, then guess what? Now another player has work, another player has a job offer. And so those are things that we as coaches, again, it's very time consuming, but it's something that we as coaches need to take more pride in doing, because we don't help enough. You know, we help enough on the court. Coaches are great on the court, you know, some are great on the court, but as far as like preparing someone, you know, to being able to be in the real world and be productive in the real world, like, it's scary. Like, you get into your adulting and it's like, oh shoot, what do I do now? You know, I'm not playing basketball. What do I do? And so that's where we as coaches have to come and be help.
Absolutely. Definitely. Ashton, are we ready to go into some viewer questions?
Yes, we are. Okay, Tyler Clark, you want to go ahead? You raised your hand. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this because I think one of the biggest things, even growing up as a player, personally, I never had a good personal relationship. Like during the season, I feel like coaches are always, like right for you and helping you out. But something I always miss, and I still look at because it's helping me become a coach for today's world, for the kids that I coach, is I always wanted that coach that was there for me all the time. Like in the summer, 5 years from now, I really don't keep in contact with my coaches. That's just who they were. It's just not what I wanted. I know a lot of my buddies who we still stay in contact, and we don't have that anymore. But I think the biggest thing is kind of funny, Coach Patty, how you were talking about little kids. I teach second grade, so when it comes to little kids, it's very, very for sure. You better get to their level, or they'll freak out, especially as a guy. They kind of get scared at first with me, but then once they see that I'm just like caring for them, but I think that's really helped me. But my question for you is that I've seen it in so many perspectives. Like I've seen the coaches that are so personable that they don't have the respect from the players because they see them as themselves, like their own kids. Like they don't see them as priority. I've seen the coaches where they have no personal, like you were saying, how you had the open door, but the other coach in front of them. I can't believe a coach would do that, but that's them. But saying like, hey, they can need to go see someone. Well, I also have seen, the coaches that are really good at that. But when it comes to getting a technique together with the coaching staff to understand, like helping all of those click together as a whole, what are some techniques you can do maybe throughout the season, beginning of the season, maybe outside in the summer of the season? What are some techniques you can do with your peers as well as your coaching staff and your whole team that will help out, I guess, with your program?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because the main thing with that is being able to create boundaries. And so as a coach, you have to be able to create boundaries to where it's like, okay, look, we cool, but once we're on the court, like you have to listen to what I'm saying. You have to respect, and for me, I got to experience that in like a huge way when I went from being an assistant coach to a head coach. And so when I went from an assistant coach to a head coach, for me, that was like a slap in the face, because it's like, okay, I have to trust my assistants that they are going to be able to build those relationships with the players, and that me as a head coach, I'm not going to know everything that's going on. And so I've worked under head coaches that want to know everything and don't trust their assistants to be able to dilute what comes through to them. So I learned that on both ends. So as an assistant, I was the person that the players would come to and they'd tell me, I'm on my period, or I have this, or I have that. And then I'm like, okay, as long as you show up today, I don't need to go and relate this information to the head coach. because it's not going to interfere with how you're playing. But if your breakup with your boyfriend or your girlfriend is going to affect how you're playing, then I have to tell coach, like, yo, she's going through it because they broke up or whatever. And so, but those are the things where, one, you have to build rapport with them so that they understand that when you do go, quote unquote, snitch to the head coach, it's because it's affecting how they play, how they're performing, how they're reacting. Secondly, as a head coach, one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and this is something that I wish somebody would have told me, that when you transition from assistant to head coach, this is going to be the biggest slap in the face, is that you have to be the bad guy for the extent of the season. And not only that, you have to trust your assistants to be able to diffuse certain situations. So for me, I remember my players, my first year as the head coach, I had some really, excuse my language, but I had some pain in the ass players, and I would not sleep at night because I'm like, they don't like me. I have issues with them. They don't like me. They don't, and for me, it was like, they don't like me. They don't like me. It's easy to like the assistant coach. It's very easy to like the assistant coach because they're coming to you and you're being that personable. But once I became a head coach, it was like, oh, wow, now I understand what the head coach is going through and why she can be, a mean person one day and then be chill the next. And so I think in order to be able to provide that safe haven of personal rapport and being able to speak to them at a more intimate level, but then also maintain the respect, there has to be boundaries. So, and it has to start from the top down. So if the head coach makes comments like the one that I was working under, where it's like, hey, these aren't conversations that are being had, that is something that to this day, I tell her that is something you should have pulled me aside and it should have been discussed behind closed doors. That's something that needs to be discussed behind closed doors. So if any of you are head coaches, you need to sit your assistants down and tell them, like, okay, these are the topics that I will allow. These are the topics that I won't allow. These are the topics that, and because I've worked under head coaches that it's all gray area. And it's like pulling teeth because it's like, okay, you don't know if that's what they want. I mean, I've talked to coaches now, and it's crazy because I'm like, I have people reach out to me and be like, oh, so-and-so needs a mentor. And I'm like, me, mentor? But it's like, okay, I've been on both sides. Where I've worked under a head coach that wants to micromanage and wants to know everything. But then I've also been the assistant that the coach allows more freedom. And so, one, you have to build your trust with your assistants. If you're the head coach, build the trust with your assistants. If you don't trust your assistants, there needs to be a change in staff. Point blank, period. If you don't trust your assistants, there needs to be a change in staff, because what ends up happening is the players, especially women, because we're so intuitive, we pick up on those things. Like, you pick up on it, And then secondly, the boundaries have to be established. And so if, let's say, Coach Imani, she comes in and she's like, what's up, y'all? And then she goes and tells somebody, like, look, you didn't touch the line. And they just kind of blow her off, like, whatever, coach. Like, and it's like, no, you need to hold your ground and say, go back and touch the line. And at the end of the day, what they understand is that it's tough love and it's coming from a genuine place because you've built that rapport. So when you try to correct, and again, it's like you were talking about, Tyler, you were talking about working with the little kids. Like, if you see them eye to eye, when you go to correct something that they did wrong, they won't see it as like, oh, shoot, this is, Mr. Clark is the cop today. It's like, no, it's someone that cares about me. So they're going to correct me. And so they're going to give me feedback, and they're telling me that to stop doing this because it's something that is beneficial to me. And so a lot of coaches try to do things without having built the rapport. And so you're literally like ineffective because you've never built that rapport with the players. And so I know a lot of older coaches, I don't talk to my high school coach. I don't talk to my college coach. We didn't have any relationship to that extent. And like you, Tyler, I didn't want to be that coach. And so for me, relationship building is very important. And I focus on the relationship building amongst the team too, because if they can't come to the assistant, they should be able to come to their captains. And again, it's a trickle effect where it starts with the head coach, it goes to the assistant, and then the assistants, the captains are an extension of the coaching staff. And then you got your point guard is an extension of the coaching staff. And so it literally is a trickle effect. But if it's not good at the top and the trust isn't at the top and the philosophy isn't established, then you kind of have everything falling apart from the top down, because the coach has an idea of how his or her program is supposed to look, but everybody else is walking around a gray area, not really knowing like what the expectations are. And so those are things that as coaches, we have to be more adamant about our black and whites and not just be like, oh, it's cool. It's cool. It's cool, T, if they come to you, don't worry about it. No, it's like, but at the end of the day, it bothered that coach, and so the more black and white you become as a head coach with the expectations, the easier it is to establish your philosophy. And then easier it is to build rapport with your players, because they'll know, okay, when we walk into those 4 lines, it's Coach P, but when we walk out here, it could be, hey, Coach Patty, or what's up, coach? But in there, it's like, yes, coach. No, coach. Yes, coach. Like I'm old school in that sense that I want a response back. Yes, coach. No, coach. Do y'all hear me? Yes, coach. And I do this in my camps, my basketball camps. I'll teach kids. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Like those are things, again, expectations. You can't expect them to do it unless they're being set those standards. So no, that was a great question. And as far as like different work, different skills or things like that, it's really more so about just establishing boundaries. Once you establish boundaries amongst your staff, amongst your captains, and amongst your team leaders, then it kind of just trickles down.
And coming from a player that pushed boundaries and didn't always think that I like always had my own kind of like, I would have taken the what's up, Coach P, into the floor and been like, why are you yelling at me? Like, we're cool. Like you were just like, we were just kicking it in your office like 10 minutes ago. What was really beneficial for me, because used to have a bad attitude, I didn't know how to control it yet, was like my coach one day was just like, I'm really mad at you. And I was like, what do you mean you're really mad at me? And she just said, I'm really mad at you. Like, I didn't like the way that you were behaving, or I didn't like this. And I think my most beneficial experience from coaches like Coach Patty was them, like it was a 2-way, like it was a street. It wasn't just like a one way of, oh, okay, like you pissed me off, I'm not going to actually tell you, I'm just going to like keep it in and then like kind of give you the cold shoulder. And as a coach, like you're already on that level, so you already kind of are superior and have that upper edge and like hand in the situation. But for my coaches to be like, hey, like I really didn't like the way you did this, or even just like, hey, I really liked the way that you did this, I think it made it very, for me to know my place, is because they were telling me my place when I crossed it or when I wasn't like upholding expectations.
Yeah. For me, that's helpful. That's one of the things that like, and I'll talk to players and I'm like, what is something that like I said to you that you haven't forgotten? And one thing they remember is like, if they ever disappointed me, like I won't be like, I'm upset or I'm mad. For me, my word is I'm disappointed. Like I'm disappointed in you. And so when I tell the player like, oh, I'm disappointed in your performance today, it's not like I'm mad. Like actually they would probably prefer that I'm mad, but it's like when you're disappointed, it's like being a parent, I mean, I'm a parent. And for me, if I tell my son I'm mad at him, he knows it's going to pass and he knows it's like, oh, it's momentarily. But if you tell someone you're disappointed in them, it's something that like, it kind of hits a little deeper and you realize like, oh, wow, I let this person down and they care about me so much that I don't want to disappoint them ever again, And so, and again, it's all about building rapport. It's all, one of the things I listened to Shaka Smart a few years back in Vegas. And he said, one of the best things that a coach can do that doesn't have kids is take a parenting class. So if like you don't have any kids and you're a coach, take a parenting class, because no offense to my cat lovers, but and pet lovers and all that, but that's not real parenting. It's like take a parenting class. Christina, no offense, Christina, but take a parenting class and it's really going to emphasize, all those skill sets in that extent, the tough love and the scolding without being demeaning, because you can scold someone and be very offensive, and be very insulting and you're not going to get a good response. And so a parenting class, and, you know, Shaka Smart was like, yeah, the best thing I did, and this was before he had kids, he was like, the best thing I did as a young coach was take a parenting class. And they were just like, okay, this is, you know, this is, become such a great coach from learning how to be a parent. If you're a K through 12 teacher, you can be a great coach because you learn classroom management, you learn how to scold without offending, you know how to, you know, I've never had to put my son in timeout because you get that teacher look, that parent look, you know, and it's like, these are things that if you learn them, you know, you're literally going to do yourself justice as a coach, especially if you're a young coach. So I definitely recommend taking a parenting class if you don't have any kids, because it really teaches you how to discipline through love. And then it teaches you how to speak to certain kids, you know, take a knee. Like, these are things that, like, and I was a sociology major growing up. And I remember before I had a kid, I was like, dude, when I have a kid, he's going to be like my science project, you know, because I'm going to try all these things. And I mean, I think he turned out great. You know, he's not somebody that I have to worry about, you know? And so for me, it's those things that I think it would be very beneficial. And if you take anything from this talk, is take a parenting class, you know, as a coach, because it's really going to help you and you're really going to learn how to address, you know, certain issues without being so, you know, standoffish in a sense.
Definitely. Yeah. Julie, we had a submitted question for you. So this is kind of directed for you, but how do you improve mental and or emotional stamina, particularly in high stress environments?
Love that question. So I actually started doing ultra marathons a few years ago, which was like 31 miles. And I remember the first time I did it, I'm like at mile 25, just like crying. Like, I'm like, why did I do this? This is horrible. Like, and then the next year I was like, okay, there's going to come a time when you're going to hit a wall and you're going to want to quit. Like, what am I going to do? How do I prepare for this? So instead of like chanting a mantra, which is like some advice like I've been given, it was like, okay, let me just take the next step to the very best of my ability, and then the next step and the next step, because a lot of times we get overwhelmed. Like when I was thinking about, oh my gosh, I just ran 25 miles, when we're thinking about how far left we have to go, it's like, oh my gosh, another 6 miles. But when we focus on staying in the present moment and doing the best we can right now, then all of a sudden we have plenty of energy for just one step. So I think it comes back to, you know, playing in the moment, living in the moment, and staying there and trying to take the very next step, whatever that is, to the best of your ability.
Definitely. That's huge. Being present. I feel like that's a huge thing now that's hard. I feel like everyone's just waiting for like, oh, only so many more days. And then it's like this part of the country, like, oh no, now
3 more months.
Yeah. And then, yeah, like California, it's like, oh, they're already starting this. And definitely, I think like being present is a huge thing. What are some ways that you kind of do that from the day to day, especially kind of during like COVID?
Yeah, it's like every day, it's like, how can I get better today? And I think it's a really intentional mindset of like, I'm not going to worry about tomorrow. Like, tomorrow can worry about itself, but just thinking of it as today is enough. And if today is all I have, how am I going to get better today? How am I going to find a way to enjoy today, even if I'm stuck in the house and I'm bored? Like, what can I do today that will bring me joy and fulfillment? So for me, that's been like every day I'm going to send out a tweet, and I don't just want to, you know, send out something that can get me a lot of likes. I want to find a way to add value to people. So that's what I've been trying to do to, you know, just focus on, you know, living every day like it's my last.
Sorry, I'm taking a note really quick. Find a way to add value to people. I love that. Also, then there's one more question, I think. Yeah, from Imani.
Yeah.
What was that?
Coach Gordon, yeah. She
Yes.
had a question.
Yeah. So Coach Gordon's question was, are there any activities you suggest to do with your athletes during the year to make sure they are up to par with their mental health?
When I became a head coach, one of the main things that I wanted, and I sent this to Aaron, I think so. Aaron, I sent it to you, my mental health handbook. I have a mental toughness handbook that I don't mind sharing it with you guys. And it's literally like, you know how you have your player handbook where it talks about GPA and rules and drug usage and all that. Like, so I have a mental toughness handbook that I created when I first took on a head coaching job, and it gives activities to do with players. And so we do a lot of journaling. One of the things that I like to do is, especially if there's like a big event. So for example, you had Ahmaud Arbery's, murder, which was super controversial, and it hit people differently. Some people were very, nonchalant about it. And then other people were really affected because they have a brother that likes to run and jog down the street, or they have a cousin that, is a marathon runner or whatever. And so for people, it hit differently. And what a lot of coaches don't do is they don't bring it in a sense, to discuss these topics, because one, it's eating up practice time, that very limited practice time, or it's creating a controversy, or you don't want to say the wrong thing because I'm a Mexican coach and, the person that was shot was Black. And so I don't understand. It's like really sympathy and being empathetic of a situation. You could care less what color of their skin is, but a death is a death. Whether it was a suicide or whether it was someone getting shot or whether somebody was in a car accident, a death is a death, and it's going to hit people differently. Some people will get over it right away and some others won't. And so as coaches, we have to be able to come together and be like, let's say there was something in the news that, someone was shot and it was a Black on Black crime or a cop or whatever. And it happened right before, and it's trending, or it's on social media, or everybody's watching it. And so it won't hurt as a coach to start practice and bring it in together and be like, how do y'all feel about that? How do you guys feel about it? Like, get it off your chest. We're here. Let's talk about it. And so some people might be like, hey, I can't relate. Or some people might not even say anything, and so but the fact that you as a coach have provided that platform to be able to discuss it, those are things that are very important, because it might be something that is weighing heavy on them, might be weighing heavy on them. And so, or they have a death in the family, and you don't know that unless you probe, and as coaches, I don't think we probe enough in that sense. But I think it's one of the things that for me, that handbook really helped me understand, and I give them a folder. So they walk in on the beginning of the year, here's your folder. And at the back of it, it has like playbook and stuff like that. So it's included. It's a mental toughness handbook that you add into your playbook. So you add it into your playbook, and it has like a description. It talks about mental health. It talks about mama mentality and talks about all these things. And then on the back end of it, it has like different journals. I'm sure, Julie, you know a lot of different resources to be able to like learn how to deal with certain situations. And so there was one that we would do every day when they would walk into practice, and it would say, on a scale from 1 to 10, how do you feel today? What do you expect to do well today at practice? And so it was like this little short, it's a 1-page journal. The top half is for before practice. The bottom half is for after practice. And so the top half will ask them, like, how did they feel going into practice? What are their expectations coming out of this practice? What is something that they want to improve during this practice? And so then we close out practice, they go get their folders and they fill it out on a scale from 1 to 10, rate your performance at practice today. And be honest, and it's like, oh, okay, well, today I practiced like crap, so I'm going to give myself a 4. Guess what? By the athlete giving themselves a 4, it kind of already emphasizes the expectation. And so I've had players that will write, and I don't look through their journals. Like, I let them at the end of the season or at the end of the day, I've had players come and be like, I need you to read this because I need someone to read it. And so I'll read it. But for the most part, like, they just literally write it and then they turn it in, and the next day it's there, And so That was for me was something that was really helpful because, like I told you guys, I was a head coach at a school that we didn't have a gym. So there were days where we had to move practice, like literally 15 minutes before practice was supposed to start. They'd tell us like, hey, there's no gym available. So then we're going to go practice outside. So it's like, okay, let's all bring it in together. Let's journal what's going on. And some players were right. I'm frazzled because it changed my routine. Usually at 15 minutes, I'm stretching, I'm putting on my shoes, and then now we're having to switch locations and it's messing me up, and so now we get to emphasize control the controllables. And so that for me was one of the resources that I used. And to this day, I use it, with other programs. Now I've started doing like mental skills training, like Zoom meetings with different teams. And so I'll probe these questions and then they'll have to answer the questions in the Zoom. And so I had a mental skills training session with Team Durant out in Baltimore. And I posed the questions like, hey, because they were getting ready to have their first Zoom workout, right? So they were getting ready to have their first Zoom workout. And the head coach was telling me that she was worried that there wasn't going to be much productivity. And so, I told her, I was like, well, hey, I can do this mental skills training with them and then kind of see where they're at mentally. And so all I asked them was, on a scale from 1 to 10, how do you rate your quarantine so far, your productivity during quarantine? Have you worked out? And so it's just little things that would probe. And I can send you guys the questions as well, or Aaron or Ashton, I can send it to you guys and you guys can send it out. But it was literally like a questionnaire. And we had a Zoom meeting before the actual Zoom workout, and we posed these questions. And so she hit me up after the Zoom workout and she was like, everybody gave on full effort. Like they were all checked in, they all realized and so it was these questions that probed certain things. And it's like, and I was honest with them too. I was like, hey, there's certain days where I don't feel like doing anything. So if we're being honest, I'm going to rate my quarantine a 6. And on certain days it might be a 10, or on certain days it might be a 2, and so those are things that for me, it's very important to be able to be transparent with them and not try to be this perfect person, for your athletes, because you're putting up a fake facade. You're putting up a facade if you try to be perfect in front of your players, and then you end up kind of doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, really, really good. Couldn't have said it any better. You are just spitting facts. Facts. For lack of a better term. Coach Corey, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks for sharing, both of you. You kind of just touched on it even a little bit. So I've been in college athletics only 3 years. And before then I was working in the mental health field full time. So I went to grad school for that. And so I have a big passion for that. And then I decided to just kind of switch gears and go into college athletics. So I'm still like putting words to this, but the tricky part for me is that like the values of coaching and athletics people are just so different from the values that we're talking about of like mental health and wellness, right? So it's like coaches, like to brag about how hard they work and they grind and they never sleep and they have all this stuff going on, and they never stop and push through and work when it's hard, all these things that we know. And then the mental health side says like, stop, take a breath, like feel your feelings, share with people, don't just like do harm to your body or yourself. And it's like, it's so hard for me because I care about both of these things a lot. Like I'm a competitor, I'm all in for that. And like, I feel like the most healthy possibility is for there to be both somehow. And, like you've mentioned already, like there's coaches on this end of the spectrum that like are maybe more old school, that like really don't care, want to hear about that stuff and just say like, go to practice, like done, live your life, be fine. And then there's coaches that, are so touchy-feely that they don't get much done. So I don't know what my real question is, but that's just kind of where I'm at, because it's so hard when I like hear these coaches that are bragging about these things that just aren't healthy.
Yeah.
And that's the example that they're setting to their kids. Meanwhile, they're verbally telling their kids, oh, like get 8 hours of sleep and take care of yourself. But then you as a coach aren't doing that. And like, I don't get that.
And it's funny you say that, because I have the coach that I worked under, she was like that, you know, she was like that and worked crazy hours. And you have to realize that lifestyles like that are a mental health situation in itself. You know, I don't know how familiar you are with OCD. People that have OCD have like an underlying issue that there's something in their life that is out of whack, right? It's something in their life that's out of whack. And the only thing they can control is how clean their house is, how organized their closet is, how color coordinated their pencils are, you know, because it's like literally OCD is a mental health issue, if we want to call it an issue. OCD is one of those. And so same with being a workaholic, you know, you try to control the things that you can control. And in turn, you're becoming this robot where it's like, you don't, like you said, Corey, they don't stop to smell the roses, because it's like, okay, I'm going to run out of time to be productive, you know? And it's like, but that's the example we're setting for these players. It's like, hey, you guys you have to get your 8 hours of sleep and you have to eat healthy. But then coach is walking in with McDonald's and a large fries and a big drink, talking about, hey, be healthy and take care of your food intake. And so for me, I think it's one of the things that we have to learn how to, again, if you become transparent. So if you become transparent and you are honest with yourself and with others, then you say, hey, you know, for example, the coach that I worked under, she was that type where it was like work, right? And when I finally sat down and had a conversation with her, I found out that, you know, her parents, in the way that she was brought up, her parents felt like she was always a failure, like she was always a disgrace, that she was always, you know, the black sheep of the family. So I'm sitting there talking to her and I'm like, bro, you have issues, like, and you're transferring them on to these players because you're not accepting your own problems. And so I literally sat down and I was like, look, you don't have to prove your parents right. You don't have to prove them wrong. Like, you are an adult, like you're 38 years old, like you are successful, you're a Hall of Famer, like you know, but it got to the point where it's like, you need to come to terms with these issues. And so I think as people, the more compassionate we are with others. So like the coworker that you have, especially now and as athletic administrator, you see these coaches that are just like, and so I would recommend sit down and have a conversation with them and be like, hey, so you're a workaholic, huh? Like why? Like, what is the underlying, and you'll be surprised what you've learned about them. And then you start to become a little bit more compassionate because you realize like, okay, this person, you know, I have one of my best friends, she's OCD, you know, she's OCD and she goes to therapy, and like, I'll sit down and have a conversation with her and I'm like, you know, and she's like, you know what? I realized that being OCD is because when I was younger, when she was younger, she was molested by her uncle and she couldn't tell anybody. And so her whole life was out of whack. And the only thing she could do was clean her room to feel comfortable, to feel clean. She would take, you know, numerous showers and she'd clean her room and she'd have everything organized and color coordinated because she knew that the outside world was hectic for her. And so now as an adult, she's 38 years old. As an adult, she's dealing with OCD and she's going to therapy, having to realize these underlying issues. And so I think the more we have these conversations with people, you know, you start to understand what it is that's going on the behind the scenes, especially for athletic admin. It's so hard. And I'm in the process of going into that side of coaching and the more administrative side. And you have to deal with so many personalities. You know, you have the coach that you said is the touchy-feely one, and then and you start to think like, okay, wait, where are the boundaries? You know, there's boundaries, or hey, the players like her way too much. Like that's weird, you know? And it's like, no, just have conversations with people. And I think the more opportunity we have to create dialogue about these situations, the better we will understand them. And so, I guess to answer your question, Corey, or, you know, more of like a statement, I think finding that happy medium would be more so trying to see things from their point of view as to why they are these workaholics, but then also try to influence them to not influence them, but make them understand that it's not healthy, you know, that it's not like, regardless of how hard they work, like whether they answer an email at 2:00 in the morning or at 7:00 in the morning, the person that's responding probably won't respond until 9 when they walk into the office, you know? And so it's like, you have to be able to find compassion in order to talk to people that deal with those like really, you know, workaholic, like work, no sleep. I think for me, that's one of the biggest lies that I grew up believing, was that, you know, what is it, like successful people don't sleep. It's like, that's the biggest lie that I learned as an entrepreneur, and that I realized, like, wow, you're not productive. Like if you can't function, like you're not productive, you know? And so I think, again, just being compassionate and learning and trying to learn the backside of their story, you start to understand, like, wow, this person has a lot of issues, underlying issues, and I understand them, and you become a little bit more sympathetic.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off what you said, the Warriors' 4 core values are compassion, competitiveness, mindfulness, and joy. So I think when it comes to like workaholic and, you know, waking up early, staying late to work, I think it comes down to, why are you doing what you're doing? Are you waking up early and working hard to try to get validation, to try to impress someone? Is it because your identity is wrapped up in the game?
Yeah.
Or are you doing it because it's something you love and it's something that brings you joy? So I think why you're doing what you're doing is more important than what you're doing if you're waking up early, not sleeping.
Definitely. Wow, you guys are really killing it. Our last question is from Coach Caitlin. It's for Julie. What are some things you have brought to your team to help them with the mental side of things, as well as have you had to be a bridge between your teammates and coaches? And if so, how do you handle that? That's a really good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Caitlin and I played for the same JUCO. So when I first created the blog, I was spending a lot of time in Coach Stebbins, my coach's office, and I would write whatever our team was going through. So I remember one week it was like, oh my gosh, we were watching film. I was like, I can't stand this body language. Like, why are they doing this? And, you know, I'll try to pick them up during the game, be like, get your head up, come on, like, you know. And then I wrote about it and I was like, hey, coach, can I present to the team on this? And I think it's one thing when, you know, you're constantly hearing stuff from your coach, but when you have a teammate who's telling you something, who worked on it, it's like, oh, okay, well, if they're saying this. So like presenting and doing stuff like that has really been how I've kind of bridged that gap between being a coach or like having coaches have these issues and, you know, running ball is psych. And also, like, I will print out my blogs and I will hand them out to my teammates and we'll all read it together in the locker room. I remember there's one point during this season where we were watching film and I was like, hang on, coach, you see how that team just like came together in that huddle and they were all high-fiving even though they just messed up? Like, why don't we do that? That's why they're ahead. Like, they're acting like a stronger team. So then the next game, it was like, okay, we're going to get touches. Like, it doesn't matter if someone messed up, if someone did really well, like, let's all come together. So for me, it's been like, okay, how can I help my team even off the court? And a lot of that is like inspiration for my blog.
Definitely.
Really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So basically, just to kind of wrap it up, this has been incredible, everything that you guys have said and everything that you're about and you represent. But something we always like to finish our blogs with are our blogs. I almost said vlog too, like, hey, welcome to my YouTube channel. Just kidding. Are my for women in sports, we want to do like your points of pride. So for our guest panelists, just like something kind of quick of like, what's one thing that you try getting out of every day when you're doing your job? It could have been the best or worst day, but what is something you can look back on and feel proud of, or something that you can think about and that encourages you of like, hey, I should do this better tomorrow, or I didn't do this good enough today. Like, how can I improve? So yeah, what's kind of your guys' personal points of pride that you have?
That's a great question. I think I measure success in terms of fulfillment. So if I get a DM and someone says, hey, this tweet really helped me out, or, if I can have a phone call with someone and, help them out in some way, that is the most rewarding part of my day. So I try to make it a point to help someone in some way and add value every day.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that too. I think the more we can add value to people's lives, especially in the mental health aspect of it, whether it's a text, whether it's hey, I miss you, I hope you're doing well, or how's COVID, I think there's not enough love going around, especially right now. And so you never know. It's easier right now to hide from this. A lot of us are facing a lot of demons during quarantine because we're having to sit in our own solitude. And a lot of us haven't been in this kind of space ever, For me, like, I'm relearning how to be a mother because I've been coaching before my son was even born. And it's like, oh, wow, I actually really love my son. Like, I get to spend all day with him, and it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's the more value, like Julie said, the more value you can add to people's lives, the more you get in return, because you can go to bed knowing that, you woke up with the purpose and you went to bed with the purpose. And so I think that's one of the biggest things.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, really good. I completely agree. Just in essence of everything that we've discussed, the mental health aspect, coaching, Julie, you're still a student athlete. Coach Patty, you coach student athletes. What are some encouraging words of advice that you want to share out to people that are listening that maybe want to pursue a coaching spot, maybe want to pursue understanding mental health better, like continuing to be an advocate after this discussion? What would you say?
That is probably like the best question thus far, because it's like all encompassing. I went into depression because I got what I want. I wanted to be a head coach. I wanted to be a head coach so bad that I took very crappy jobs. But at the end of the day, like, I had the head coach title, and so like Julie said, I lost sight of my why. And I started to realize, like, okay, I'm chasing this accolade that is not giving me any fulfillment, and I'm losing sight of why I'm actually doing it. And so one thing that I would recommend young coaches that want to be head coaches, really understand who you are as a person and as a coach, and hold firm to that. Because you'll be working under institutions where they'll make you want to be someone that you're not. They'll try to influence you to not be as outgoing or not be as personable, or like Corey said, like, they might work under administration that says you're not supposed to be that nice, or you're supposed to be in the office 15 hours a day. Like, the more you hold true to who you are, the easier it will be to maneuver through this career, because being a coach is cutthroat. Being a coach is very cutthroat, and you're going to go through some things that are going to hurt your feelings, and you're going to think that people that were your friends are going to undermine you and take your, certain job offers from you. And I mean, I've literally experienced it all. And there were days where, like, I really got to the point where I was like, wow, this is a very cutthroat business that we're in, and I think that if I didn't have my faith, I would have probably gone down a deeper hole, through with my depression, because I had nothing to hold on to. I had a losing season. We were 2-25 one year. And I was questioning what I was doing. Like, well, I'm not supposed to be coaching like this is, but I had, from that same season, I've been in 5 of their weddings and I'm a godmom to 3 of their kids, but we were 2-25 that year, and I ended up being coach of the year because my colleagues understood what I was going through, as far as like the resources and the lack of resources that I had. And so you have to be able to hold on to something, because it's a very cutthroat business. And if you don't have, whether your family or your faith or your why, if you don't have something to hold on to, you're going to have some very tough disappointments through your career. And I mean, I've been coaching 16 years, and I like I said, I've pretty much experienced all of it, getting let go because a new AD came in and cleaned house, or, getting let go because the school's in the risk of losing their accreditation, or, hey, getting let go because just the coach decided we didn't want to go that way, and so for me, the more you hold on, and I saw this Instagram post, I'm gonna be cliche, and this Instagram post said that the best advice that I've gotten is, don't attach yourself to a position, a title, anything. Don't attach yourself to any title, any position, any school, any organization. Attach yourself to a purpose, because if you attach yourself to a purpose, whether it's D2, D3, high school, middle school, it becomes your big time. It becomes your purpose because it's what you're trying to do. And so the title is no longer, it no longer holds any weight. And so the more you attach your daily strive to your purpose, the more fulfillment you'll have. And like Julie said, it's your why. At the end of the day, it's like, what is your why? And the more you pursue positions, like, let's say for me, like, I'm in transition, and I'm gonna give him a shout out because he's in here and he told me not to, but I work with the Washington Wizards junior NBA team, and I'm having a transition from coaching college to working with, basketball camps, and for me, it's like, I love basketball camps because it's no longer, my fulfillment is no longer attached to a head coaching title. Like, I would have wished a month ago, maybe even 3 months ago, when I interviewed for a head coaching position, I was really sitting there and it's like, do I even really want this job? Do I even really want to, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just apply. And if I get it, cool. If not, like, my purpose is not that head coaching title, and so, Jameson Martinez, he hit me up at the Blue and was like, hey, are you still thinking about coaching? And I was just like, well, if the opportunity comes up, and it's like, oh, hey, why don't you coach with us at the Junior Wizards, and so for me, it was one of those things where it's like, had it been 4 months prior, I probably would have, felt as a disappointment. But now it's like, wow, like, I get to be a part of an organization that, helps kids, and I get to coach, and so it's one of those things where for me, I've finally shifted from not chasing that head coaching title to just chasing a purpose. And so it becomes all encompassing.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's well said. I would say just build people up. My mom used to tell me, if you want to know if somebody needs encouragement, here's how you tell: if they're breathing. So literally everyone needs encouragement. No one is exempt. I read this study a few weeks ago. If you give someone 4 compliments and 1 criticism, our brains perceive that as neutral. So you have to give someone at least 5 compliments for every criticism. So we need to be a constant source of encouragement.
Muted.
Can you guys hear me?
You were muted for a second.
Oh, okay. That was really weird. I was like, it says host muted you. I was like, Ashton, are you trying to sabotage me right now?
No, I'm so sorry.
Adam, are you trying to sabotage me? Just kidding. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you, everyone. once again, I am super thankful to just have the ability to create these conversations and open that up. If that's not one thing that I got from this, then yeah, just open dialogue and all that fun stuff. If you guys don't mind, Coach Patty and Julie, if you want to drop just like an email or any type of contact information that our coaches can like shoot you other emails, like questions or anything like that they kind of didn't